11,000 years ago, a person crouched in a stand of wild grass with a basket and cut the seed heads loose before they could shatter. And the plant in their hands was already three separate species fused into one, already older than humanity itself. They did not know this. They could not have. They knew only that if they cut the heads before the wind took them, beat the seeds free, and ground them between stones, they would have something that could be carried, stored, and eaten through a winter. The hillside was in what is now southeastern Turkey, a low limestone slope where the grass grew shoulder-high and brittle, its ripe heads scattering on their own when a breeze moved through. This was how the plant survived. It threw its children to the wind and trusted the soil. We do not know that person's name, their language, or the god they prayed to. We know only that from this one wild grass, on this one weathered hillside, would come the single most important food in the history of our species. Today it covers more of the Earth's surface than any other crop. More than 2 billion people depend on it to live. It is in the bread, the pasta, the noodles, the beer, the cake, the communion wafer. We call it wheat, and for a long time we thought we understood it. We were wrong about almost all of it. This is what the DNA actually shows. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button. Every video here digs up the real origin of something you thought you knew. Let's begin. For most of the 20th century, the story of wheat looked clean and simple, a story of human ingenuity. Somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, the arc of fertile land running from the Levant through Mesopotamia, early farmers gathered wild grass, planted it, and slowly, generation by generation, selected the best plants until they had a crop. The textbook version was a story about us. Clever humans took a wild plant and patiently bred it into something useful. Wheat was a monument to human cleverness, a thing we made, and there was real evidence behind this. The Fertile Crescent genuinely is where the domestication happened. Archaeologists digging at sites like Abu Huraira in Syria and Kayonu in Turkey found the charred remains of early grain, and they could see the transition in the bones of the plant itself. Wild wheat shatters when ripe, scattering its seed. Domestic wheat does not. It holds its seed on the stalk, waiting for harvest, which makes it helpless in the wild but perfect for farming. That single change, the loss of shattering, is the fingerprint of domestication, and the archaeological record showed it appearing in the Near East thousands of years ago. The dates were roughly right. The geography was right. The case looked closed. There is a specific place that sharpens the picture. On the slopes of Karakadag, an extinct volcano in southeastern Turkey, grow wild einkorn populations that genetic surveys have fingered as among the closest living relatives of the earliest domesticated wheat. Stand on that black basalt ground, and you are standing at something very near the root of agriculture. Just to the west lies Göbekli Tepe, the carved stone enclosures raised by people who lived in this same landscape at this same threshold moment when the gathering of wild grain was tipping over into the planting of it. The hillside and the temple belong to the same chapter. The crop and the first monumental architecture rose together. But the simple story had a problem hiding inside it, and the problem was the plant's own genome. When geneticists first began to look closely at wheat, they found something that made no sense for a plant humans had supposedly built from a single wild grass. Bred wheat does not have one set of chromosomes, or even two. It has 6. It carries 3 complete genomes folded together inside every single cell, labeled A, B, and D. Most of its genes exist in 3 copies. The full genome runs to roughly 16 billion DNA letters, more than 5 times the size of the human genome. The international consortium that finally assembled a complete reference sequence in 2018 needed more than 200 scientists across 20 countries and over a decade of work. because the three nested genomes are so similar to one another that ordinary sequencing software could not tell which fragment belonged to which subgenome. This was not the signature of a plant slowly improved by farmers. This was the signature of something far stranger, a collision of separate species that had happened long before any human picked up a basket. The work that cracked the real story open came from cytogenetics and then from raw sequencing, and the figure most associated with untangling it is the geneticist Bikram Gill, whose laboratory at Kansas State University spent decades dissecting wheat's tangled ancestry. The decisive confirmation came when a team led by Jan Dvorak and colleagues, with the high-quality genome of the wild goat grass Aegilops tauschii, sequenced by Ming-Cheng Luo and others, and published in Nature in 2017, pinned down the donor of wheat's mysterious third genome. Their work and the broader phylogenetic analysis led by Thomas Markussen, published in Science in 2014, demonstrated something that overturned the human-centered story completely. The most important events in wheat's history did not involve humans at all. They happened in the wild, on a geological timescale, while our ancestors were still becoming human. Here is what the DNA revealed, and it escalates with every step. The first revelation is that bred wheat is not a domesticated grass. It is a hybrid of hybrids, a triple-decker species stacked from three wild grasses that should never have been able to breed together. The A genome came from a wild grass called Triticum urartu. The B genome came from a relative of a goat grass called Aegilops speltoides, though its exact donor has never been pinned down and remains genuinely unidentified to this day. The B genome is, in a sense, a ghost. We can read it inside every loaf of bread on Earth, and we still do not know for certain which wild plant it came from. Botanists have spent half a century combing the goat grasses of the eastern Mediterranean for the match, and the closest candidates differ from the B genome in ways no living plant fully explains. The donor may be extinct. The mother of half the world's bread may have died out before anyone could name her. The second revelation is the timescale. The Markussen team's analysis showed that the very first hybridization, the lineage split that produced wheat's component genomes, traces back roughly 5.5 million years. The D genome itself emerged from an ancient hybridization between the ancestral A and B lineages around that time. To put that in perspective, this is older than the human lineage, when the genomes that would one day make bread first began to braid together. Our own ancestors had not yet split fully from the line that leads to chimpanzees. The bread on your table is the product of a genetic event older than the genus Homo. The grasses were experimenting with this fusion, while Australopithecus was still millions of years from walking, while the Mediterranean itself was a different shape. The third revelation is how the pieces came together, and it shatters the idea that humans engineered anything. The first union happened entirely in the wild. Two wild grasses, Urartu and the speltoids relative, hybridized on their own. As Bikram Gill memorably put it, two grasses simply happened to have fun, and their chromosomes spontaneously doubled. That doubling is the crucial trick. When two different species hybridize, the offspring is usually sterile because the mismatched chromosomes cannot pair properly at reproduction. They have no partners to line up with when the cell tries to make pollen and eggs. But on rare occasions, the whole chromosome set duplicates, giving every chromosome a partner again, and the hybrid becomes fertile in a single generation. This is allopolyploidy, and it is one of the most powerful creative forces in the plant kingdom. The result of that first wild collision was wild emmer wheat, a tetraploid grass with 4 sets of chromosomes, the AB genome, and it appeared in nature with no human involvement whatsoever. The fourth revelation is the moment that actually made bread possible, and it was an accident in a field. Wild emmer wheat had been domesticated in the Fertile Crescent, becoming the emmer that fed the first Neolithic villages, and later the durum wheat we still make pasta from today. Emmer was a serious staple in its own right. It filled the granaries of pharaonic Egypt, and Egyptian tomb paintings show workers threshing it. the same grain that built the labor force behind the pyramids. But durum and emmer are not bred wheat. They make a dense, flat product. They lack the elastic, gas-trapping gluten that lets a loaf rise into something light. The leap to true-bred wheat required one more collision. Somewhere in a farmer's field, most likely in the region around the southern Caspian, domesticated emmer grew next to a scruffy, unremarkable wild goat grass called Aegilops tauschii. The two hybridized. The chromosomes doubled again. And in that instant, a brand new species came into existence. Hexaploid-bred wheat carrying all three genomes, A, B, and now D for the first time. No one bred it. No one planned it. A farmer simply noticed that one plant in the field was different, larger, more productive, with a fatter head, and was clever enough to save its seed. That single plant, in that single field, is the ancestor of nearly all the bred wheat on Earth. And the gift that goat grass carried was extraordinary. The D genome from Aegilops tauschii brought genes for adapting to harsher, more continental climates. Cold winters and dry summers, conditions emmer could not tolerate. It also carried the genetic basis for the superior dough strength that makes a loaf possible. The proteins that let bread rise rode in on the weed. This is the difference between a crop confined to the mild Near East and a crop that could spread across the entire temperate world, from the steppes of Asia to the plains of North America. A plant most people would have pulled and thrown away, handed wheat the keys to the planet. Now comes the darker revelation, the twist this story has been building toward. We can name the wild ancestors of wheat, but the wild plant that bred wheat actually descends from, the original hexaploid that first arose in that field, never existed in the wild at all. Bred wheat is a species that has no wild form anywhere on Earth and never did. It was born already domesticated, born in cultivation, a plant that cannot exist outside the relationship with humans that created it. Its seeds do not shatter and scatter. It cannot reseed itself or survive on its own in any landscape. Drop a handful of wheat grains in an empty field and walk away, and within a few years, there will be nothing there but other plants. If every farmer on Earth stopped planting it tomorrow, bred wheat would vanish within a few seasons. It is a living thing that depends utterly on us, a species with no home but the field, and the original wild lineages are themselves slipping away. Wild emmer, the ancestral grass that started the whole chain, still grows on a handful of hillsides in the Near East, in the Galilee and the hills of Syria and Iran, but its habitat is being paved, grazed, and farmed into fragments, and conservationists now race to bank its seed before the populations vanish. These wild stands are not just botanical curiosities. They hold genes for drought tolerance and disease resistance that breeders have already pulled into modern crops to fight diseases like stripe rust. The wild grasses that gave wheat its genetic depth are becoming endangered relics, even as their domesticated descendant feeds half the world. We are letting the library burn while still checking out its books. There's a final twist buried in the science, and it concerns wheat's strange interior life. Because wheat carries 3 genomes inside one cell, those genomes must somehow be kept from interfering with each other when the plant reproduces. There is even a single gene called PH1 that acts as a kind of genetic traffic warden, forcing each chromosome to pair only with its true partner and not with the similar chromosomes from the other 2 subgenomes. Without it, the whole nested system would collapse into chaos at every reproduction. Research led by Hongbin Su and colleagues, published in 2019, examined wheat's centromeres, the structures that organize chromosomes during cell division, and found they were unlike those of almost any other plant. Where typical plant centromeres use small repeated DNA units, wheats were built from much larger, unusual repeats, and different subgenomes use different ones. as if each ancestral genome had kept a private identity card so the cell could tell them apart. Wheat's machinery evolved rapidly to manage the chaos of being three species at once. The plant is, at the cellular level, still negotiating a truce between three ancient strangers it has never fully merged. Now consider how this story has been misread even in recent years. In 2015, scientists reported wheat DNA recovered from 8,000-year-old sediment off the Isle of Wight in southern England in a study by Oliver Smith and colleagues. It seemed to show wheat had reached Britain 2,000 years before farming arrived there, implying a startling network of Stone Age trade carrying grain across a Europe that supposedly had no farmers yet. It was a sensational finding. But ancient DNA is fragile and easily contaminated by modern material, and a later team at the Max Planck Institute, with Clemens Weiss as first author and Hernan Burbano, developed a new test for authenticity based on the specific chemical damage genuinely old DNA accumulates, the way cytosine letters are misread as thymine over millennia as the molecule decays. When they applied it to the Isle of Wight wheat, the damage pattern was missing. The DNA was most likely only a few hundred years old. The Stone Age wheat trait evaporated, a reminder of how easily this plant's deep history can be misread and how careful the genetics has to be. The food you actually eat sits on top of all this ancient strangeness as a very recent invention. For the first 10,000 years after wheat appeared, there were no plant breeders. Nature kept crossing wild relatives back into the crop, and farmers simply selected whatever grew best. But the wheat in your supermarket loaf is almost entirely a product of the last 150 years, and especially the last 60 years. In the mid-20th century, the agronomist Norman Borlaug and others bred dwarf wheat varieties with short, stiff stalks that could carry enormous heads of grain without falling over, fed by industrial fertilizer. The trait came from a Japanese dwarfing variety called Norin 10, carried across the Pacific after the Second World War, and the genes behind it, the RHT genes, are the same ones that quietly underwrite much of the world's bread supply today. This green revolution roughly doubled and tripled yields and is credited with saving perhaps 1 billion people from famine. But it also narrowed the crop dramatically. Vast regions now grow a handful of genetically similar elite varieties, a monoculture of staggering scale and staggering vulnerability, all resting on that thin, recent layer of breeding laid over a 5-million-year-old genome. What does this mean for the wheat in your kitchen right now? It means the slice of bread in your hand is one of the strangest objects in your home. It is not a thing humans invented. It is the descendant of an accident. 2 wild grasses that collided in deep time, joined by a third weed in a Neolithic field, fused into a 6-genome creature older in its origins than our own species. It means the plant cannot live without you, and never could, a domesticated ghost with no wild self to return to. The brittle wild grasses that gave it life are fading from their last hillsides, even as their impossible child feeds 2 billion people. Every loaf is a monument not to human cleverness, but to a series of lucky, genetic collisions we did nothing to cause, and only recently learned to read. 11,000 years ago on a hillside in what is now Turkey, a stand of wild grass shattered in the wind and threw its seeds to the soil, as it had done for millions of years before any human watched. Somewhere among it, a person with a basket cut the heads before they fell and carried a few seeds home. They could not have known the grass in their hands was already 3 species deep, already older than humanity, already carrying inside it the accidental architecture of the modern world. We do not know their name. But the bread on your table descends from that morning and from a collision in a field that no one designed. If you found this story remarkable, consider subscribing. There are more origins to uncover, and the DNA is only beginning to tell us what it knows.